And you're listening to KKCR Hanalei, KAQA Kilauea. And this is Taj with Transformational Tea. And my next guest is Joelle Dunlup, and she is the founder of Square Peg Foundation, an adaptive writing center specializing in working with autism families. And she has taught hundreds of students to ride. An equestrian since childhood, she's participated in many different disciplines, including racing, polo, hunting, jumping, 3-day eventing, and reining. Joelle has worked professionally in many facets of the equestrian industry, including racing, marketing, special events, and breaking and training of young horses, in addition to teaching. And Joelle started working with developmentally challenged children in 2001 and has been developing a unique teaching method which resonates. Her philosophy of inspire, guide, challenge, and her sensitive style of instruction have helped hundreds of students to achieve important goals. And Joelle was just here yesterday doing a workshop teaching the horseboy method, and she is here in the studio, and I'm so excited. Hi, Joelle.
Hi, Tash.
How are you?
I'm well, thanks.
Good. It's so nice to have you.
It's great to be here.
And I mean, most people, I don't think, including myself, had ever heard of the horseboy method, or I mean, I think a lot of people have started hearing about, working with horses for different issues that we might have. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about what even got you into wanting to work with special needs peoples and families?
Sure. I was your typical horse crazy girl. It was all I cared about. Neighbors would call the police because I was riding the neighbors' horses. I was just that kid. And anytime you're that passionate about something, you always want to think, how can I use this for good, as opposed to this just being kind of this selfish endeavor, especially if you worry about exploiting the animal. Over the years, I would make my living in horseback riding, and I found that working particularly with the children that were difficult to teach, was the most rewarding work. And then I was a very young mom, and my son had a completely different way of learning than I did. And I was very surprised. I'm always told if you read to your child will read. And that wasn't the case with him. And that took me on a journey of learning how we learn, which fascinated me. I can tell you a little story about the first autistic child that I taught.
I would love that.
I was running a riding school, and this adorable little girl with freckles and braids showed up, and Mom said she's autistic. And the only thing I knew about autism at the time was I had seen the movie Rain Man. And I said, well, what do I do? She says, treat her like everybody else. That's what she needs to do, is just treat her like everybody else, which I did. And she was in a riding class with just a few kids.
How old was she?
She was probably 10. And the horses were distracted. It was a windy day, and the horses weren't behaving. And I was giving her a direction to redirect the horse, and it didn't happen. And the horse got more distracted, and I did what every riding instructor in my life did, was I shouted louder, and it didn't happen. And I shouted louder again, and it didn't happen. And I was frustrated, and I was angry, and I ran over, and I grabbed the horse, and I grabbed the rein of the child, and I said, just do it this way. And she leaned over, she got really close to my face, and she whispered, I'm trying.
Wow.
And everything changed in that moment, about the nature of what I was doing, why I was doing it, what teaching was, what learning was. Clearly, I wasn't listening to this child, and she really was trying. And I got fascinated, and I read a lot, and I read, and I interviewed people, and I talked to people, and I found that the autism community was very underrepresented. And in therapeutic riding, that's traditionally used for people with physical disabilities. And most autistic people, their issues are rarely physical. Mm-hmm. And I thought we have to do something different. And just this notion of, I'm trying, really
Yeah.
lit me up.
Right.
That was about 17 years ago.
Wow.
So here we are.
So then how did you go, because we only have 15 more minutes, unfortunately. How did you find the horseboy method? How did that all occur?
I was just doing my thing and was doing well, had a good reputation, had a wonderful group of families that we worked with. But I was lonely and it doesn't pay much. And when you have to take care of the animals and do all the teaching and do all the fundraising, it can be pretty exhausting. And I had a board treasurer who is an autism mom. And she said, I'm sending you to Southern California to take this training with this guy. And I said, no, you're not. I'm busy. And she said, no, you're going. And I had the excuse that I wanted to visit some folks in Southern California. And I went with this really, really, really defensive posture that none of these people had anything to teach me. I was in the trenches. I was doing what I was doing. And what happened is I was on the right track. We really were doing what needed to be done, but I was doing it intuitively and I didn't have a framework. So I was always guessing. Rupert Isaacson is an autism dad and a fabulous horseman. And he's associated with fabulous horsemen all over the world. And he gave me not just a framework for following my intuition and realizing what was important. And one of the frustrations I was having was when you were having success with a child, but then you got challenges from the parents. And he made it very clear to me that my purpose was to serve the family, not just the child. And that was another
huge.
big
That's
pivot
a
point.
big change.
And that's been a beautiful, beautiful gift. And then I also had the gift of tribe. I had these other people who were doing the same work I was doing, were as passionate about the horses, as passionate about the training of the horses. And we've all helped each other remember that we do love the horse and that we do have to fuel that passion so that we bring so much care to the work. It's been a lovely ride. And I think it's probably 2009 when I first met Rupert and Ileana and the people at the Horseboy. And since we've done nothing but grow. And we now have a really beautiful international organization with a network of, I think we've got about 400 really good registered centers all over the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then what, if you could put it in a nutshell, what does it do? How does it work with a child? Mm-hmm. And what have you seen happen doing this work?
Sure. The brain science comes down to most people on the autism spectrum. And when we say autism spectrum because there are people who are highly verbal. There are people that are not verbal. There are people who are highly sensitive. There are people who seem almost insensitive to heat or pressure. You have sensory seekers. You have people who avoid. So it's very complicated. And so trying to find those similar points where you're really being effective, where you're really serving the family, can be kind of elusive and tricky. But what we found out in the brain science is that almost all people on the autism spectrum have a heightened fight or flight response, an overactive amygdala, which, interestingly enough, a horse does as well. He's a prey animal, and all prey animals have to have that. It's a really important survival skill. When that amygdala is activated, when that person is in a fear state, the body is flooded with a hormone called cortisol. It's an important survival skill, again, but what it does on purpose is it shuts down reasoning. It shuts down emotional regulation so that you can spend all of your energy getting away from danger.
Right, and run away.
Right. The antidote in the body, the antidote hormone to cortisol is oxytocin. And the most effective way for the body to start to produce oxytocin is through rhythmic rocking of the hips. And that may sound like, I don't know what it sounds like, but if you think about the most soothing, wonderful things that you do, Most of them involve a rhythmic rocking of the hips,
Right.
whether it's dancing, whether it's swinging on a swing. In fact, if you're in a bad mood, get on a swing set. You never see a grouchy person on a swing set.
No, that's true. And I remember you saying it's also what we do when we hold a baby.
Yeah.
We rock.
Yeah.
Back and forth,
Yeah.
or up and down,
Yeah.
or, you know, but we're moving the whole time.
We're moving rhythmically, and we're moving smoothly. When you're dysregulated, when you're upset, it's very hard for the body to do that.
Yeah.
If I can put that person on a horse, and the horse does it for them, then we start to break that chain of the cortisol release. Then we start to relax the brain into a state where it can emotionally regulate, where the brain can take in information, and where the brain can communicate and communicate needs.
So the horse is doing the movement, and the child has to follow because they're sitting on the horse.
They're sitting on the horse.
So it just happens all without anybody knowing what's going on.
And
here.
that's the groovy part, right? It just feels good.
Yeah.
And the other great thing about a horse is that the animal's carrying you, and he's supporting you. And that, there's an old Spanish proverb that says, when I'm on my horse, only God is taller than I. And when you can put a person who's fundamentally dysregulated in that position, then you've served the family.
Wow.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a couple of stories of things that have happened on a horse, or getting to the horse, or even not on the horse? Because I know there's Rupert has his story.
That's a
with
lovely
his son.
story. Yeah. Well, Rupert's story with his son, you can see the film The Horse Boy. There's a lovely documentary, not just of using the horse, but of a beautiful journey of shamanic healing in a very unexpected way. You can see it on Netflix. I think you can even get it on YouTube now. It's a documentary film called The Horse Boy. There's a book. It was a New York Times bestseller, and now there's a follow-up book called The Long Ride Home. All by Rupert Isaacson, and The Long Ride Home just came out last year, and all proceeds, if you buy the book, we'll try and get it in some stores here before I go home to California, go to the Horseboy Foundation. But that's the story of the 3 follow-up shamanic trips that Rupert and his son Rowan took on their healing journey.
Mm-hmm. Well, will you tell us that story about Rowan and going under the horse? Was that Rowan?
Oh, yeah.
That
was Rowan. That was Rowan.
Like, that's a not horse story.
That is a not horse story. So as the story goes, when Rowan was diagnosed, he had terrible, what we call tantrums. And an autism tantrum isn't like a typical toddler tantrum. They can go on for hours, and they're so painful for the family. And again, you have a dysregulated system. You have no access to the prefrontal cortex of the brain. This child is just in distress, inconsolable distress for hours.
So it's not a tantrum at all.
Not a tantrum.
It's just that it's been called that, and it's nothing like a tantrum from someone who's trying to get their way.
Exactly.
That's not
that's
what it's
a really
about.
good. It's not about that. It is.
Something that's just out of control.
It's an
inside their
electrical
brain.
storm in the brain. Yeah, and a violent electrical storm. And some people will react violently because they're so dysregulated.
Right.
So one of the few things that they could do to calm Rowan was walking in the woods next to their home outside of Austin, Texas, and they would walk for hours. And as they were walking for hours, and Rupert was kind of daydreaming, as you would, walking a toddler for hours, hoping that he isn't going to, have a screaming fit. Rowan dove underneath the fence into the neighbor's yard full of horses and threw himself belly up underneath the meanest, bossiest horse in the herd. And of course, Rupert panicked. He had been a horse trainer his whole life and had left horses because he felt his son was unsafe around them. And the horse, rather than stomp on him or run away and kick the child in the head, started exhibiting behaviors that were very soft, very sweet, giving body language that was extremely maternal. And Rupert was able to fish his son out from underneath the horse. So then he approached the neighbor, who's kind of a typical Texan, talking to his hippie South African neighbor, and said, my son seems really attached to your horse, Betsy. And, the Texan neighbor says, well, Betsy's a rough gal, you don't want to be anywhere near Betsy. And he says, well, I recognize that, but there's something there. Well, if you can handle Betsy, she's pretty grouchy. And that's where the journey began. And that's where Rowan became verbal. Again, he had lost his verbal ability, which happens with some autistic children between the ages of about 18 to 30 months, where they regress and lose language and lose motor function, which is very distressing, as you can imagine, for any family. He became verbal. And if you would know him today, he's 14 years old. He's very quirky, but beautifully verbal.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
Yeah.
So your foundation is called Square Peg Foundation, and I know there's a really great way to describe what is Square Peg. Why did you pick the name Square Peg? And
yeah, it was when everyone. I come from Half Moon Bay, California. We were in Palo Alto at the time, and of course, everyone in Palo Alto loves a startup. So we had all these really smart, hip marketing people all sitting around thinking what we were going to name this brainchild that we had, and there were whiteboards and ideas, and I was driving down a mountain road, and I realized these are the kids and these are the horses that don't fit in. They're the square pegs. And we presented it to the group, and strangely enough, two of the quirkiest people in the room really disliked it. They thought it was pejorative. They thought that it was saying something bad, that you're an odd one. But we stuck with it. And a few years later, there's a book called Not Even Wrong. And it's a really nutty guy named Paul Collins, who's an autism dad. And he wrote that the problem with pounding a square peg into a round hole isn't that the pounding is so hard, it's that you're destroying the peg. Yeah. And that made me feel like our intuition was absolutely right. Absolutely. And it was just such a powerful image. Yeah.
We're not meant to change them. We're meant to change us, to appreciate and love and find new ways of creating harmony.
And who wants to destroy a beautiful soul?
Yeah. And so you came and you did this workshop, and I was there, and what I experienced was, because I'm not an equestrian and a lot of people weren't, was a whole new understanding about different ways to work with autism families and individuals, and like so much love was expressed by you and what you've learned. And I know you're going to be doing other things here at sometime soon, but what was your goal in the workshop and what you see happening here?
My goal was to come and check it out, so to speak. And who doesn't want to check out this island, right? It's so beautiful, and the people really reflect the landscape here. People have been so gentle and thoughtful. I didn't know what to expect. I came here on by the ask of our mutual friend Sheila, and Sheila is one of those kind of wizards in my life that makes things happen, and
she definitely does.
She does, and it turned out my husband's been ill for a little over a year, and this has been a lovely journey for the two of us. We haven't been able to travel, and that's been a hole in our lives. So we thought we'd take a risk, and we would check it out and see what was possible here on this island. And the CDC says, the Center for Disease Control says that 1 in 64 babies born in the world today will be diagnosed on the autism spectrum. Wow. Which gets really close to 2%. And for boys, that number is 1 in 44. We're not sure about why that discrepancy between boys and girls are, but it doesn't change the fact that these people are here and these families need support.
Right.
Another issue that we serve about 50 or 60 families a week, is there's nowhere for them to vacation. So I thought, what if I could go scope out the island and find a place, teach them some of these precepts about acceptance, about movement, about how to understand that this isn't a control issue. This isn't somebody just throwing a fit to try and get their way, as you so beautifully put it, and create this supportive environment. Then you could really nurture a family just by giving them not just respite, but a chance to be a family in a beautiful place. Yeah. That's my goal.
Yeah.
That's my goal.
Well, if you want to tell us, what is your website? So if people want to find out more about the Square Peg Foundation, about Joelle, what she's doing, autism, there's a lot on the website. Would you tell us the name of the website? And
Sure.
can they reach you by phone even if they wanted to?
Absolutely.
You're here until Thursday, and I just feel like there's a whole momentum. You know, there's many autism families here that may not have heard about the workshop or you, and it's like, for me, you're like a new light that just come into my world, you know, and come into Kauai. So I want to share that light personally. So can you give us that info?
Sure. You can always find us at www.squarepegfoundation.org. That's also mirrored at www.everyonefits.org. We're very easy to find on Facebook at Square Peg Foundation. And you can look up The Horse Boy, both a film, horseboymovie.com. Kidsmustmove.com is our movement method, because we realize not everybody has access to horses, and that was a big jump forward for us, that we would be able to reach families everywhere, whether or not they had access to horses, just simply by the same movements and patterns and framework and support system.
Because there's lots of different animals that people can open up to, that children love, that can support them in different ways.
And and they will connect to different animals. We have 2 ridiculous goats at Square Peg Foundation, and you'd be surprised how many people connect with the goats, or the dogs, or the cats.
And is there a phone number too they could reach you while you're on island if they want to talk to you?
Sure. Area code 650-520-8744.
Great.
And that's my direct number.
So that is squarepegfoundation.org or kidsmustmove.com. And to reach Joelle Dunlup personally, besides going to the websites, you can also call her at 650-520-8744. And we just have one more minute, so if you want to give us maybe just some little piece of your heart to support what's going on this island, that would be so awesome.
You know, mostly it's gratitude, right? Gratitude is for me and for my staff. That's where we always come back to when we're tired, because it can be hard work and it can be heartbreaking work, and gratitude always fills up the reservoir. So I'm so grateful for all the opportunities, all the beauty here, all the kindness here. I'm also very grateful for fabulous staff and volunteers back at home who are taking care of Square Peg Ranch while I'm gone. And I'm very, very grateful to you, Taj. This has been lovely.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm really grateful to you and your husband for coming and sharing and really, motivating the people that were there. We're really motivated, and so I think when we can share that with even more people, the next time you come, it'll be wonderful.
Can't wait to be back.
Yeah, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, you have a beautiful day.
You too.
And up next is Indigo with Omnitorium. Sorry about that. And I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for joining me with Transformational Tea, and we love you so much. Have a beautiful day.